Hello and welcome to the Evenweave channel. So in this video I just want to give you an introduction to the actual world itself. So I've done an introduction about where we're up to in the writing, but I want to really go into an overview of what the world that the book is set in. Now what we notice is that the Evenweave Saga series itself is set predominantly in the world of Targost. Now, Targost is actually just one large group of continents, or specifically one continent and several different isles that are attached to it, as you can see here. So we're just going to have an overview of that now, and then we're going to look at the other parts of the world that we've developed to add layers of depth to this. Now, if you zoom in here, we can see, so this is the map. Now this is a map I've actually drawn by hand and then edited and sent onto here for ease of use. Now if we zoom in, you can see it's all drawn by hand. I'm going to go through a map making video and how I made this continent in a separate video for you, but for now we're just going to have an overview. So I'll zoom back out here so you can have a full view of it. So this is the main continent of Targost. Now, like I said, there's a main, the mainland in the centre, and then there is specifically 3 sets of islands that are discussed in the main series. Now, other parts of this will be discussed in other books and other series, but for the most part, this is the part we're looking at. So there are 5 major realms, or original realms in Targost, and what I will do is just quickly show you each one individually. So here in the northwest, we have West Dunedain. Now, there's actually 2 parts to Dunedain, east and the west. So it's one realm split into 2 later on, and we'll see that in the history. As you look at the history, you'll see why the division has come to pass. Now, the defining trait, and the reason I start here, is because from the northwest there is actually a very large black dark cloud, and it's mostly made up of things like smog and ash and dust. Now this drifts in from the northwest and covers very heavily over West Dunedain, and mostly covers in a slightly lighter layer the Greylands, which is East Dunedain, and then filters over with kind of the trails of the cloud over the land of twilight in the center. So we have the heavier side here, the black clouds having no sunlight or penetration, which then kind of lessen as they go over to the east, and then lessen again as they go into the center realm here. And they are kind of mitigated. The filtering effect of that is the mountains. So the mountains here act as a bit of a filter to it as the clouds go over. And again, we'll look at that in more detail when we discuss each realm specifically. But what this does is it adds a level of, obviously changes the weather and the outlook and the climate and the people. Because obviously if it's dark all the time and no sunlight ever gets through, then it's going to change the flora and fauna, the environment, and also the people that live there. So that's something that isn't specifically shown on this map here. So West Dunedain is completely black, effectively. There is no sunlight coming through at all. However, there is light of other forms, such as glowing flora and fauna, like the fish, the strange alien fish type creatures of the depths. We have, with the luminescent glows and the glowing fungus, that sort of thing will appear here quite often. And there's also, because of the nature of the gas in the actual dense thick clouds itself, there are ripples of auroras, but again it's an aurora of chemical combustions within the cloud itself. Now these vary from pinks, purples, blues, greens to reds, oranges and violets, and that's shown in some of the pictures that I've got for the lands here. Yeah, West Dunedain is an interesting place, and it's the most unique place of all of them. And specifically, the realm of East Dunedain, so it's one realm split into 2, but then now in the current setting of Evenweave, it's actually 2 realms separately, but originally it was one people. So let's have a look at East Dunedain. East Dunedain is also known as the Greylands because it's obviously slightly less dark than the Darklands. Now, Here again, it's a little bit stranger, like Dunedain because of the darkness, but it's less severe, less harsh, because less volcanic activity, especially over into the east and the south. Um, and that's allowed a more advanced, not advanced civilization, but a more um, a race of human beings that are less fighting for their lives against the actual environment itself and more able to have a normal political and cultural development. Now, there is a lot of other things that happen in East Dunedin because what we have is actually four groups of people all fighting for the same place. So what we have, again, we'll look at the history in more detail in another video, and I will overview it here, but the actual East Dunedin was never found as one of the main groups of humanity after what we have as the cataclysm of the Great Flood at this time. So when there are native people here, but they're from after the Great Flood, so they're not pre the Great Flood. So everybody from here is actually not traditionally native to the East Dunedin itself. What we have is an invasion of people from the West Dunedin coming over to the east, which happens regularly because the two sides are in conflict. We have people that travelled kind of from the southern area, southern eastern area, so over here in these particular woods and this side of the coast, you actually have a lot of people that migrated from the south here near Templetown, or where Templetown would then be built, and the grey havens at the bottom, which is the gap here underneath Lantern Light. And so we have a native race, we have an invading race from the west. We also have a migrant race from the south. Now, all the way down here, we have the people of Keriklan in the high peaks in the central south region here, and they like to live in the high mountains. Now, very early on in their period, they actually sent a set of migrants up to the north, which followed these mountainous lines up here and ended up settling the capital of Blackglass City here. So we have, which then that sort of people would develop and evolve over time as well, over many thousands of years. So they are descendants of their own people. And then we also have the people that lived in the centre here that migrated up north. And then we have the people of Erebus from the islands that would have sailed across and begin to live on the coastline and then filter through. So what we have is an amalgamation of four different types of people, kind of all interbreeding, interrelating, and growing a more melting pot version of the Dunedin lands. And again, it's East Dunedin, so it's dark, so it's got similar qualities and traits to West Dunedin, but a little bit less severe. And what we find here is this is one of the primary settings for a later book, which we have in the Greyland series, which there's 14 major ruling families, and they all war because they've all got different cultural backgrounds and political views. So that's something we'll look at later. So moving on, we have down here in the southwest is Rousmere. Now this is the largest of the realms individually, but it is unfortunately a desert land because down here it's a lot warmer. There's the black clouds from the northwest actually hit these high mountains and dissipate. So we have a desert land here. So all this is desert dunes and desert cities and desert towns. And we visit Rousmere quite often in, especially the final phase of the series. So yeah, very interesting people. So that's my reference point. There's a lot of kind of Egyptian, Arabic, kind of that sort of area you can see from the pictures here. That's the sort of environment we're looking at there. Now we're going to jump all the way across to the other side of the world here, to the other side of the continent, which is London. Now London is actually split into three parts. So there's East London, which is here. It's like this kind of large land offshoot here with a mouth and a bay and a bridge here. This is the main part of London, and this is where the capital is, the capital of Shields in the north. Now this is particularly kind of grass plains and nomadic lands in the middle, but then we have a more built up area of cities and states at the top and at the bottom as well. So again, grass plains, there's a lot of horses and livestock, but because of the open land, it's also privy to things like tornadoes and tidal waves and tsunamis and hurricanes, that sort of thing. Because of the weather conditions, there's less impediments to block the gathering of energies, which will be created when the hot and the cold airs link together from the north and the south. Popping across over, still part of London, is actually West London. Now there is a second capital here, but we'll look at that in the histories. Now, this tends to be an area of conflict between the lands, as it's kind of out the way and less protected by East London. It tends to, through the eons, as we'll look at the histories, has a lot of conflict between different realms, particularly Erebus trying to claim the land, the Grey Lands from the north, and even Carrick Clan and Ralphsmere trying to make claim to this area. But at the moment, at the Evenweave setting, it is particularly ruled by London and are protected by their city-states. That's what we call West London here. We also have South London, which is here. And again, this is more in the central where the neck is. We have the bridge here. It's called the Horse Bridge. And there's another kind of bastion called Rosenhill Hall, which protects this neck from the mainland, which is why, apart from ships landing, eastern London has never really been conquered by land itself because of this bridge being so well protected. But down here in South London particularly, it becomes this part of a world called the unclaimed lands. Now the unclaimed lands particularly are things like there's a swamp, a large swampland here, and the League of Unaligned Villages, and also Castletown. And this particular period here is called the Conflict Lands because it's where the borders between Carrick Clan and London meet, and particularly there's a lot of change in ownership, and this land generally has a lot of conflict and debate around who rules at any given time. And equally, we then move across here. Now, this is a very interesting place. So, this is Carrick Clan in the central south of the mainland. Now, Carrick Clan and their particular world are centred high up in the mountains, so we can see there's a lot of mountainous areas here, both to the east, west, north, south. Now, that is actually what we call the Carrick Clan Highlands, and that's where the cities are. So the capital city itself, the Twin Peaks Hawkspire, are at the top of two of the highest mountains in the world. And what that means is it's actually like a sign of honour. The higher you live, the more higher in status you are in that particular culture. So people try and avoid the lowlands particularly. And so we have the lowlands down in the bottom here, both in the south and in the north of Carrick Clan. And this creates a microclimate of culture. And we actually have, again, an amalgamation of kind of the lowest end of the population of Carrick Clan, the kind of low of the low, the criminals, the people that haven't got any status at all, and also the people that migrated from the swamps, which we'll look at in a future video, but also the people from London invading. And this creates a very unique and very dark place. It is quite cloudy because there's a lot of rainfall, because the clouds and the weather conditions trap inside this massive basin between the mountain ranges, which leads to a very wet area, very much like the Lake District, but worse. And so the people here are a unique people that are kind of tied to both Carrick Clan and London equally. And once we saw post the Great War, a lot of people from Dunedin that had come all the way down, so from north west during the invasion, were trapped. Any fleeing armies that were trapped in this fight here, where the city of Harvest now sits, actually weren't able to get north, and they fled into these Carrick Clan lowlands to hide, because the constant cloud cover of the rain clouds actually allowed them to survive, because the people of Dunedin actually can't live in the light, because that's the way they've genetically evolved. So they're the main 5 realms. Now, however, there is, well, sorry, 4. We're going to look at Erebus actually in a moment. So let's do that now. So Erebus is the island state. Now, there's 2 parts of Erebus. There's Upper Erebus and Lower Erebus. Now, Upper Erebus is the original, so we can see, and the capital city here is the city of Trident, and it's seafaring people, so they have massive, large fleets of ships rather than a huge sprawling empire on the land. So there's actually a lot more smaller islands than we have on here that you can't see, but they also control a lot of the coastlines and some of the other areas around this to the north and the east. But they were also one of the largest and oldest civilizations because they were on an island far away from the main continent. When the Great Flood happened, they were very mostly protected, so they were able to develop a little bit quicker. Now, what happened was in the early histories is in order to maintain growth and stability, they created or set off 3 ships, large ships, colony ships, to set off a new empire. Now, 2 sailed south and 1 sailed to the west. Now, the 2 that sailed to the south will have sailed all the way down here and across the southern plains and to these 2 sets of islands here. Now, this is what we call Lower Erebus. Now, Lower Erebus consists of 4 sets of major groupings of islands. So, as you can see here, we have Healer's Bay in the south. We have the Smoking Isles to the north, which are these more resource-based areas. Now, the 2 colonies that were set up were the Islands of Hope and Faith. Now, the Island of Hope is the larger one on the left. They founded the city of Verona. And we have the Islands of Faith here, which are the city of Valarium on the right. Interestingly enough, I'd never actually watched House of the Dragon or read it when I named the city, and the same names obviously we recognise from the House of Valarium in House of the Dragon, but actually I'd never, it was just a bit of a coincidence, so we may just change that later on if we need to. But yeah, because it's not, the capital city of Faith isn't actually mentioned in the books, but parts of the island are quite critical, so we can probably look at altering that when we publish that. So those are the 2 capitals. This is called Lower Erebus. Now, originally it was part of the same realm, but now in the Evenweave setting, it's kind of separated into 2 different states, and these are 2 different independent states as well, Islands of Hope and Faith, but they work together as one. So now we have Upper and Lower Erebus as separate realms. So the reference to the 5 realms really does relate to when the first 5 realms were founded, as opposed to the much later on period of Evenweave. Finally, we come here. This was the 3rd colony of Erebus. However, this is called the Black Isles. And this is again because if we notice where it is, it's northwest of Dunedain. And we know that this massive black cloud that affects the main continent comes from the northwest. And in fact, it comes from over here, this way, past here. So the actual island itself suffers in the same way as West Dunedain is. It's completely covered and obscured from from light, sorry, so it's in complete darkness. And so the island's a very difficult, harsh place to live with a lot of volcanic action, a lot of maelstroms. You can see the God's Eye maelstrom there in the centre. But generally, this is a place for outcasts and people that have been exiled and basically just looking for a more independent life. And so we have a lot of what we call tongues or fleets, and each one of these little markers on here is a reference to a different group of pirates and tongues, the major ones. I mean, there's probably about 100, maybe 100,000 different names and groups of pirates in these Black Isles. Some of them are single ships, some of them are 100 ships strong, and they all obviously have their own political agendas. We will write a book on this at some point, but these individuals do feature heavily in the Evenweave Saga as well. So that's the areas covered. Now, finally, we'll go to the centre. Now, this is its own realm, but it's not classed as one of the 5 realms because it's an amalgamation of all the others. Now, this is the realm of Twilight, or as you can see on the right there, the Old Lands. Now, the old lands were the original home place for the old ones, the race that came before humanity in this particular world. And we'll look at that again later on. But once they disappeared, these lands again became contested as no one owned them. So what we had was all five races fighting for control of these middle grounds here, the old lands. Now, eventually, after the Great War, what we find is as an attempt to unify the realms as one, the City of Twilight was made, built by all five races and all five cultures, in order to create one megacity to make one unified people. It didn't quite work out like that, but Twilight City, or the megacity, is the focal point for the Evenweave Saga, as you will see. And these lands are quite vast in the centre. And even in the north, so a lot of it is the remnants of the old lands, kind of cities and cultures, and we can see from all the ruins and the mountains here. So we have two parts. We have the far reaches and the lost lands further north, and this is the questing land as well, where a lot of the randomness happens, but still very much unexplored by most of the people here because it's just so vast and contains a lot of difficult and strange features. So that is Targost. Now, just to point out, that's one continent. Okay, I've not filled these in. As you can see, these are ideas for other continents that I've already got, a concept of different continents and stories that we will look at, including this one, which is Zarathane. Zarathane is a large island or a small continent itself, which will have a unique series set towards it. So that's just one addition there. So that's an introduction. Now, as we can see, I'm just going to give you a bit of a preview. So if we go on to Twilight, the realm of Twilight, for example, if I double click on there, I've got an individual map of that realm, which we will look at, and all the locations that are mentioned in the book so far in that particular realm, which all have more information and images and ideas on as well. So that's for the same. So if we go on to London, you can see there, same thing. And that's the same for all the five realms. We've got to Rousmere here. You can see that there. So it's quite vast. There's a lot of information already made, as there would be as the series is already written. But it is constantly growing, particularly the Greylands at the moment. The Greylands are, again, fully developed, but I'm going into far more detail here because of the other book series that we're writing. You can see here, entitled Greyland Saga. So yeah, there's a lot of information out, and I want to use this channel to kind of look at everything individually and not just skip anything. So we will deep dive into each and every location and space in this world. And if you also look and notice here, we've got lists for the magic systems, the characters individually, and the history of the world, which we will look at in other videos as well. So there's plenty to go through already, and it is growing fast. So welcome to the world of Evenweave Saga and the continent of Targost. So I hope you've enjoyed. I hope that's given you an appetite for more, because there is so much to discover in this channel and this world, and the Evenweave Saga is just the tip of the iceberg, despite it being a large 6-book series. So yeah, please join me on that adventure, and we will see you soon for the next video. Thank you very much, and goodbye.